This is an original work by Little Sunny Mush. Please do not copy, reference, or redistribute without permission. Thank you. Part 1. Anxiety pulsed through his gills as he clawed his way through the tunnels of the deep palace. 8-year-old Fjord's talons tingled with unfamiliar energy as he flapped his wings to get another burst of speed. He flung himself into the library, startling the librarian into dropping the pencil she held. Fjord cut through the small distance between him and the other dragon, gripping his rather small claws into the coral desk surrounding the librarian. "I need a scroll on animus magic," he flashed in a hurry, causing a startled expression to cross the librarian's face. Animus magic? Of course, my prince, but... Are you all right?" she replied, with an overall worried expression, scrambling her claw under the desk to find Fjord's library card. "No time to explain, Clam," Fjord pressed on impatiently. "I need it. Right now. Please. It's urgent." He watched as the pale silver dragon pulled out his card and stabbed a mark on the checkout side. She pushed a hinged section of the desk to the side and swam out. Clam drifted up to one of the higher shelves and ran her talons over each scroll, silently reading each title to herself with impressive speed. Fjord tapped his claws on the desk eagerly. He had little faith his suspicion was correct, but his prickling scales forced him to check anyways. Clam came back down and handed him a rolled scroll held together by a leather tie. Fjord took it from her talons and gave her a thankful smile as he drifted over to a reading ledge. He brushed away clouds of bubbles his wings caused as he settled himself down on the smooth, rocky surface. He slid the leather tie off and slipped it onto one of his wrists to prevent it from floating away. He unrolled the scroll and held it close to his snout. Okay, animus magic. He ran a single claw down each line as he read it. Animus abilities, animus legends, animus cautions. He felt a twist in his chest, just as his eyes magnetized towards the last section. Animus side effects! He flung his wings open with the triumphant pulse of his scales. Yes! He impulsively screamed, using his voice, causing a gust of water to race into his throat and out his gills. The librarian tipped her snout up towards him with an indignant, scolding look. He covered his snout with his talons and flashed sorry to her with apologetic eyes. She snorted out a stream of bubbles and went back to her work. Fjord turned back to his scroll and read it intensely, commanding thoughts, twitching wings, tingling claws. He jolted his head so far back he nearly hit it on the top of the alcove. Tingling claws! I wasn't imagining it! He tilted his head over to look warily at the leather band loosely around his wrist. But there's only one way to find out for sure. He slid the leather band off and clutched it harshly in his talons, feeling his claws pierce small holes into it. What would he enchant it to be? He thought long and hard, then remembered a spell he'd written down not too long ago. It had been a hopeless coping mechanism since his brother Manta had fallen very ill. Fjord had desperately wanted to help him. He breathed out a plume of bubbles, closing his eyes. "Leather band," he thought confidently to it. "I command you to become a gold bracelet, and whoever wears you will be healed from any injuries they have received in the past, have received now, or will receive in the future. You will change size to fit any dragon who wears you." He waited in painstaking silence as the leather band began to twitch and shake in his claws. He let it go as it floated to eye level with him. He drew in a sharp gasp as whirls of gold spiraled across the gray-brown surface. It turned and shifted in the water in front of him, then stopped and drifted back into his talons. He blinked speechlessly at the now gold bracelet that sat in his claws. "I'm an animus," he thought with disbelief. He raced off his ledge, out of the library without a glance behind himself. He clutched the bracelet close to his chest and bulleted down the tunnels. Finally, he made it to the infirmary and fanned his wings out to stop himself. He nodded politely to the healers, then drifted forlornly to a kelp bed hosting a deep purple sea wing. This was his older brother, Manta. Fjord sighed. He'd missed seeing Manta's black freckled scales and purple-pink webbing. He nudged his brother with his nose, Manta's pale blue eyes fluttering open. "Fjord?" he flashed with weakened scales. Fjord nodded his head and gently grabbed one of his talons. Manta looked at him, then the gold bracelet. "Come with a gift for me," he joked through aquatic with a weak smile. Fjord nodded his head and pointed to the bracelet, flashing his scales a bit too bright in excitement. "This will help you, Manta!" He slid the bracelet on his brother's wrist without waiting for a response. Manta looked amused. "How will a bracelet—" He froze as the bracelet stretched to fit around his larger wrist. His eyes widened with newfound energy. The clouded grayness cleared from them as the richer colors returned to his scales. His exposed ribs were hidden by new healthy fat as his muscles became their full strength. A pulse of light went through all his bioluminescent scales, causing two of the nurses to look over. Manta pushed himself up to sit and glanced at the bracelet, then to Fjord. Fjord, how did you... Fjord held back a roar of triumph and pulled his brother's ear down to him. I'm an animus, he gurgle-whispered using his voice so the nurses couldn't read his scales. He then flung his wings open and wrapped them around his brother. Manta gave him a hug back, though then parted to give him a worried glance. Fjord could tell what he must be worried about. Don't worry, Fjord reassured him. I just found out a few minutes ago. My soul is A-OK. He glanced through his peripheral vision to see a nurse give him a confused glance as aquatic. Manta's eyes were as wide as the moon's. He then barreled into Fjord and tugged him out of the infirmary by his forearm. He flung him into their bedroom, Fjord blinking in confusion. Manta rolled the large boulder over the doorway to seal it off. He turned and looked at Fjord, gripping both his talons in his. Fjord, you lovable idiot. Why would you use this as your first spell? He flashed, but with an affectionate look in his face. Fjord wrung his talons and hunched a little lower. That was an easy question. I couldn't just watch you slowly die. Fjord looked at Manta, letting out a muffled whine, seeing his nose scar had too been healed from the bracelet. He surveyed him, hiccuping on bubbles out of alarm. All his brother's scars were gone. He looked just as pristine and untouched as he had years ago, before he'd been assigned as an underwater soldier. Manta exhaled through his nostrils, enveloping Fjord in his wings. Thank you, little brother, he said in such a tone that made Fjord want to cry. Fjord nudged his snout with his own as they drifted apart again. So, now what? Manta flashed. I may not have gotten that far, Fjord said with a sheepish grin, earning a chuckling headshake from Manta. Well, for one, Manta began, you can start by challenging Mother and Father.